Some think that love, strong, true, and self-sacrificing, is not to be found in the Orient. But the story of Charan, which comes down 400 years and more, proves the contrary, for it still has the fresh, sweet flavor of a romance of yesterday, albeit the setting of the East provides an odd and interesting background. In the days of King Seongjong, AD 1488 to 1495, one of Korea's noted men became governor of Pyongan province. Pyongan stands first among the 8 provinces in terms of erudition and polite society. Many of its literati are accomplished musicians and show a keen ability in state affairs. At the time of this story, there was a famous dancing girl in Pyongan named Charan. She was very beautiful and captivated audiences with her singing and dancing. Her talents were exceptional. She understood the classics and was well-versed in history. Charan was renowned as the brightest of all the geisha, celebrated far and wide. The governor's family included a son, aged 16, with a face as comely as a picture. Despite his youth, he was well-versed in Chinese and a gifted scholar. His judgment was excellent, and he had a fine appreciation for literary form, so that the moment he lifted his pen, the written line took on admirable expression. Known as Kidong, the gifted lad, his name became famous. The governor, having no other children, cherished this son deeply. On Kidong's birthday, all the officials and special guests were invited to celebrate. There were also a company of dancing girls and a large band of musicians. During a lull in the banquet, the governor called his son and ordered the chief of the dancing girls to choose the prettiest among them to dance with Kidong and entertain the guests. The company unanimously called for Charan, as she was the one most suited by her talents, attainments, and age. Charan and Kidong danced together gracefully, captivating everyone with their performance. The governor, pleased with the display, called Charan to sit on the dais, treated her to a share of the banquet, gave her a present of silk, and commanded that she be the special dancing maiden to attend to his son from that day forth. From this birthday onward, Charan and Kidong became fast friends. They thought the world of each other. Their love became more enchanting than any delightful story in history. When the governor's term was extended for 6 more years, they continued to live in the North Country. Eventually, when it was time to return, the governor and his wife were greatly anxious about separating their son from Charan. They feared he might suffer greatly if forced to part from her. However, taking her with them, considering she was not his wife, could harm his reputation. They were unable to decide and referred the matter to their son. They said, "Even parents cannot decide as to the love of their son for a maiden. What ought we to do? You love Charan dearly and parting will be difficult. Yet, keeping a dancing girl before marriage is not proper and could interfere with your marriage prospects and future. However, the custom of having a second wife is accepted in Korea. Do as you think best in the matter." Kidong replied, "There is no difficulty. When she is before my eyes, of course, she is everything. But when the time comes for me to start for home, she will be like a pair of worn shoes set aside, so please do not be anxious." The governor and his wife were greatly delighted and said he was a superior man indeed. When the time came to part, Charan cried bitterly, so that those standing by could not bear to look at her, but the son showed not the slightest sign of emotion. Those looking on were filled with wonder at his fortitude. Although he had already loved Charan for 6 years, he had never been separated from her for a single day, so he knew not what it meant to say goodbye, nor did he know how it felt to be parted. The governor returned to Seoul to fill the office of Chief Justice, and the son came also. After this return, thoughts of love for Charan possessed Kidong, though he never expressed them in word or manner. It was almost the time of the KAMC examination. The father, therefore, ordered his son to go with some of his friends to a neighboring monastery to study and prepare. They went, and one night, after the day's work was over and all were asleep, the young man stole out into the courtyard. It was winter, with frost and snow and a cold, clear moon. The mountains were deep, and the world was quiet, so that the slightest sound could be heard. The young man looked up at the moon, and his thoughts were full of sorrow. He so wished to see Charan that he could no longer control himself, and fearing that he would lose his reason, he decided that very night to set out for far-distant Pyongan. He had on a fur headdress, a thick coat, a leather belt, and a heavy pair of shoes. When he had gone less than 10 li, however, his feet were blistered, and he had to go into a neighboring village and change his leather shoes for straw sandals and his expensive head cover for an ordinary servant's hat. He went thus on his way, begging as he went. He was often very hungry, and when night came, was very, very cold. He was a rich man's son and had always dressed in silk and eaten dainty fare, and had never in his life walked more than a few feet from his father's door. Now there lay before him a journey of hundreds of miles. He went stumbling along through the snow, making but poor progress. Hungry and frozen nearly to death, he had never known such suffering before. His clothes were torn, and his face became worn down and blackened till he looked like a goblin. Still on he went, little by little, day after day, till at last, when a whole month had gone by, he reached Pyongan. Straight to Charan's home he went, but Charan was not there, only her mother. She looked at him, but did not recognize him. He said he was the former governor's son, and that out of love for Charan he had walked 500 li. "Where is she?" he asked. The mother heard, but instead of being pleased, was very angry. She said, "My daughter is now with the son of the new governor, and I never see her at all. She never comes home, and she has been away for 2 or 3 months. Even though you have made this long journey, there is no possible way to meet her." She did not invite him in, so cold was her welcome. He thought to himself, "I came to see Charan, but she is not here. Her mother refuses me. I cannot go back, and I cannot stay. What shall I do?" While thus in this dilemma, a plan occurred to him. There was a scribe in Pyongan who, during his father's term of office, had offended and was sentenced to death. There were extenuating circumstances, however, and he, when he went to pay his morning salutations, had besought and secured his pardon. His father, out of regard for his son's petition, had forgiven the scribe. He thought, "I was the means of saving the man's life. He will take me in." So he went straight from Charan's to the house of the scribe. But at first, this writer did not recognize him. When he gave his name and told who he was, the scribe gave a great start and fell at his feet, making obeisance. He cleared out an inner room and made him comfortable, prepared dainty fare, and treated him with all respect. A little later, he discussed with his host the possibility of meeting Charan. The scribe said, "I am afraid that there is no way for you to meet her alone, but if you would like to see even her face, I think I can manage it. Will you consent?" He asked about the plan. It was this. Since it was a time of snow, daily workers were called to sweep it away from the inner court of the governor's yamen, and just now the scribe was in charge of this particular work. He said, "If you join the sweepers, take a broom and go in. You will likely catch a glimpse of Charan, as she is said to be in the hill kiosk. I know of no other plan." Kidong consented. Early in the morning, he mingled with the company of sweepers and went with his broom into the inner enclosure, where the hill kiosk was, and they worked at sweeping. Just then, the governor's son was sitting by the open window, and Charan was with him, though not visible from the outside. The other workers, being experienced, swept well. Kidong alone handled his broom awkwardly, not knowing how to sweep. The governor's son, observing this, looked out and laughed, called Charan, and invited her to see this sweeper. Charan stepped out into the open hall, and the sweeper looked up to see. She glanced at him briefly, and then turned quickly, went back into the room and shut the door, not appearing again to the sweeper's disappointment, who returned in despair to the scribe's house. Charan was first of all a wise and highly gifted woman. One look had told her who the sweeper was. She returned to the room and began to cry. The governor's son, surprised and displeased, asked, "Why do you cry?" She did not reply immediately, but after being asked repeatedly, explained, "I am of low status. You are mistaken in thinking highly of me or valuing me. I have not been home for over 2 months. This is a special honor, and I have no reason to complain. But I think of my home, which is poor, and my mother. It is customary on the anniversary of my father's death to prepare food from the official quarters and offer a sacrifice to his spirit. But here I am, and tomorrow is the sacrificial day. I fear that no act of devotion will be performed. This distresses me, and that's why I cry." The governor's son, moved by her words, trusted her completely and without question. Sympathetically, he asked, "Why didn't you tell me before?" He prepared the food and told her to hurry home and perform the ceremony. So Charan returned swiftly to her house and said to her mother, "Kidong has come, and I have seen him. Is he not here? Tell me where he is if you know." The mother replied, "He came here, it is true, all the way on foot to see you, but I told him that you were in the yamen and that there was no way for you to meet, so he went away, and where he is, I do not know." Then Charan broke down and began to cry. "Oh, my mother, why did you do so cruelly?" she sobbed. "I can never break with him nor give him up. We were both 16 when chosen to dance together, and while it may be said that men chose us, it is truer still to say that fate chose us. We grew into each other's lives, and our love was unparalleled. Though he forgot and left me, I can never forget or give him up. The governor, too, called me the beloved wife of his son and did not once refer to my low status. He cherished me and gave me many gifts. It was like heaven. In the city of Pyongan, gentry and officials gather as men crowd into a boat. I have seen many, but none was ever like Kidong. I must find him, and even if he casts me aside, I will never forget him. I have not kept myself as I should have, because I have been under the power and influence of the governor. How could he have come so far for someone like me? He, a gentleman of the highest birth, for the sake of a humble dancing girl, has endured all this hardship and come so far. Could you not have thought, mother, of these things and given him at least some kindly welcome? Could my heart be other than broken?" Tears flowed from Charan's eyes as she pondered where he could be. "I know of no place," she thought, "unless it be at such and such a scribe's home." Quick as thought, she flew there, and they met. They embraced, tears streaming, without a word spoken. Together, they returned to Charan's home side by side. As night fell, Charan said, "When tomorrow comes, we shall have to part. What shall we do?" They discussed their options and decided to escape that night. Charan gathered her clothes, treasures, and jewels, making 2 bundles. He carried his on his back, and she carried hers on her head. They slipped away while the city slept. They followed the road leading toward the mountains between Yangtok and Maingsan counties. There they found a country house where the governor's son took on the role of a better-class servant. Although he lacked practical skills, Charan was adept at weaving and sewing, and thus they managed to live. After some time, they moved into a small thatched hut in the village and made it their home. Charan, a skilled seamstress, worked tirelessly day and night, selling her treasures and jewels to make ends meet. Charan also knew how to make friends and was admired and loved by all in the village. The villagers, touched by the hardships faced by this mysterious young couple, offered their support, and thus their days passed peacefully and happily together. To return to the story, in the morning, the friends who had gone to study with Kidong at the temple awoke to find him missing. The temple was in an uproar as they searched for the Chief Justice's son. They looked everywhere, but Kidong was nowhere to be found, and word was sent to his parents. The former governor's household was in great distress over such a significant loss. They scoured the area around the temple, but there was no sign of him. Some speculated that he had been lured away and transformed by a fox. Others feared he had been eaten by a tiger. Believing him dead, his parents mourned him and burned his clothing in a sacrificial fire. In Pyongan, the governor's son, upon realizing Charan was gone, had her mother and all her relatives imprisoned. However, after a futile month-long search, he released them and abandoned the matter. Charan, now content with her chosen one, said to him one day, "You, a son of the gentry, have given up your parents and home for the sake of a dancing girl to live in this secluded corner of the hills. This touches upon your filial duty, leaving your father and mother uncertain if you are alive or not. They should be informed. We cannot live here forever, and returning home seems impossible. What do you think we should do?" Kidong replied hopelessly, "I am distressed and know not." Charan responded brightly, "I have a plan that can help us move past our mistakes and create a new future. Through it, you can honor your parents and face the world with dignity. Will you agree?" "What do you propose?" he asked. Her answer was, "There is only one way, and that is through the official examination. I know of no other. You understand my meaning even if I do not elaborate." He said, "Your plan is perfect, but how can I obtain the necessary books?" Charan replied, "Don't be anxious about that. I'll get the books." From that day forth, she searched through all the neighborhood for books to be secured at all costs. However, being a mountain village, there were few or none. One day, unexpectedly, a pack peddler came by, carrying a bundle that included a book he wished to sell. Some villagers wanted to buy it for wallpaper, but Charan secured it first and showed it to Kidong. It turned out to be a special work for examinations, filled with numerous exercises written out. The book, written in small characters, was massive, containing several thousand exercises. Kidong was delighted and said, "This is enough for all needed preparation." She bought it and gave it to him, and from then on, he diligently studied day after day. At night, he studied by candlelight while Charan sat by his side, spinning silk. They shared the light together. Whenever he showed any sign of slackness, Charan would urge him on. They worked together in this manner for 2 years. Kidong, being a highly talented scholar, made steady progress. He was a beautiful writer and a master of the pen, and his compositions were peerless. It became evident that he was destined to win the highest place in the Kwago examination. Around this time, a proclamation was issued for a special examination to be held before His Majesty the King. Charan prepared the food and all necessities for Kidong to journey on foot to Seoul to try his hand. At last, he found himself within the palace enclosure. His Majesty came into the examination arena and posted the subject. Kidong took his pen and composed his piece with ease and inspiration, his lines flowing like bubbling water. Once finished, the announcement was made, and the king ordered the sealed name of the writer to be opened. It was revealed that Kidong had secured the first place. At this time, Kidong's father was serving as prime minister and was in attendance upon the king. The king remarked to the prime minister, "It seems the winner is your son, but he writes that his father is chief justice, not prime minister. What can this mean?" He handed the composition to Kidong's father and asked him to verify it. The minister, upon seeing the writing, burst into tears and exclaimed, "This is my son's work. 3 years ago, he went with friends to a monastery to study, but disappeared one night. Despite my extensive search, there was no trace of him. I feared he had been lost to some wild animal and held a funeral service. Placing our house in mourning, he was my only child, gifted and dearly missed. Seeing his handwriting now brings back the memory of losing him, which feels as fresh as if it happened yesterday. He noted I was Chief Justice when he vanished. I have no idea where he has been for these 3 years or how he came to participate in this examination." The king, astonished, summoned Kidong before the assembly. Kidong, dressed in his scholar's robes, was brought into the king's presence. The king asked him why he left the monastery and where he had been for the past 3 years. Kidong bowed low and confessed, "I have acted wrongly, leaving my parents and breaking the laws of filial devotion, deserving of punishment." The king responded, "There is no concealment before the king. I will not condemn you. Speak the whole truth." Thus, Kidong recounted his story. All the officials listened intently. The king, moved by his tale, turned to the prime minister and said, "Your son has shown repentance and achieved great success. He has earned the highest place and now stands as a member of the court. We cannot judge him harshly for his love for Charan, forgive him for his past, and grant him a new beginning." His Majesty continued, "Charan, who has shared your trials in the mountains, is no ordinary woman. Her strategy for your recovery and success shows great wisdom. She is more than a dancing girl. Let her be your lawful wife. Raise her to equal rank with you, and may her descendants hold high offices in the realm." With these words, Kidong was honored, and his father received him back with joy. A grand celebration followed, where Charan was brought up in a palanquin and formally declared the wife of the minister's son. In time, Kidong rose to become one of Korea's foremost statesmen, and they lived happily together into old age. They had 2 sons, both distinguished graduates who held high office.